Hey dudes, it's Lerald, and this is another update to the Lightning Spear Amazon build I've been playing throughout Dawn of the Hunt League. I have made it even faster and deadlier than it was in our last update, when it was already a build I really loved and thought was a real build of the league candidate, but now it's really feeling like one of the greatest builds I've ever played. I've finished out my Atlas tree, except for Delirium because Simulacrum is painful, but otherwise I have cleared all of the in-game bosses, gotten my 8 points and everything, and had a really amazing time doing it. This is definitely a GGG approved way to play the game. I am one-button clearing maps for the most part, but when it comes to bosses, I'm using like several different keybinds and actually having a lot of fun flipping in and out of melee range. And ranged, and kind of combining that ranged and melee play style. Again, very GGG approved. I'm playing the game the way they intended and actually feeling pretty good about it. So let's go ahead and get into it. And first we'll start with yet another patch that is coming. And there's a lot happening in this patch, although, we don't know exactly when it's going to land. I appreciate that they're being very open about what they're planning. With every patch, they also drop a follow-up to say, here's what we're planning for our next, so they're having like a 3-day week next week, so obviously that's gonna constrain the possibility of maybe not actually getting this patch that week. That sure would be nice if we get another patch next week, but I guess I'll just have to live with it if we don't. They're gonna be buffing loot. That's something that people have complained about a lot, and they're really gonna do it in 2 ways that I care about, like kind of have a lot of vested interest in. Would just simply be increasing the boss drop rate of items. I would hope this particularly applies to currency and high tier items. I liked the tiered rare system quite a lot in this game, and I would really just like for like when you're killing a difficulty 4 map boss in a tier 16 or 17, whatever item, zone level 80 to 82 area, you kill that boss, I really want that thing to be dropping multiple high tier rare items, and also like some valuable currency items every single time. Not necessarily divine every time, but like certainly more chaos orbs, right? And then the other thing that they're doing is buffing the drops from Asmiri Wisps. Now what's interesting is I did actually spend the last couple of days playing around with these. I actually don't think they're bad. I don't love the style of play that's required for them. Maybe there's a bit of a disconnect between the amount of effort for the reward, but I actually got like, in the first hour of playing with these, maybe this tainted my opinion, but I got 3 divines in the first hour of playing around with Wisps, really investing in them and trying to min-max them. So yeah, I would say Wisps have actually, despite my initial hatred of Wisps, I kind of came around on them. Then they're also making corrupted nexuses and unlocking your 40 Atlas points just be like faster and easier. That's good. And then on the subject of simulacrums, they're going to make pinnacle content easier to acquire, easier to access, and reduce the difficulty of simulacrums. Thank God. So I will be waiting on that. And then they're going to make some of the remnants and expeditions be not quite so insane. So that's good. So this all looks great. This is all very much needed stuff. And now let's go ahead and get into the character. So for the most part, I'm still using the same basic skill setup as before. I have not upgraded Stormlance or Primal Strikes to 6 links, although I do have some recommendations for that. But Lightning Spear, it's still the same. I also haven't leveled this up to 20. I've basically been playing SSF, since the entire, not the entire league. I've bought a few things, but I would say 90% of the gear that I'm wearing is stuff that I actually found. And I really have only made self-found gear upgrades since the last update, with the exception of a couple of jewels, because I just could not get lucky on jewels. I did buy those, but pretty much everything else has been self-found. So Lightning Spear, we're still using Volt, Perpetual Charge, Bullseye, Twofold, and Fork on Lightning Spear, and really using this as a primary clearing skill. And Volt is, it's kind of our main constraint on Lightning Spear. It's really the only thing that's like super unintuitive about it, and I've talked about it before, but basically you have this buff that builds up as you move around, and when you kind of have breakpoints on the like 10 buff mark for Lightning Spear, or for Volt I should say, you get an extra chain off of all of the Lightning Spear projectiles each time you have, or for each 10 voltaic charge you have when you cast it out, and you also get 5% extra damage per 10 charge. So this really does incentivize using the Roa, because you're able to move and cast a little bit more easily, and you can see like you can cast pretty quickly and hit 10, 20 or even 30. And that's kind of how you want to play it. You basically want to be moving all the time and casting Lightning Spear once you hit the like 10, 20, or 30 volt breakpoints. Now, there are some situations that this doesn't play very well with. As you can see, I have King of the Mist portals up here from my last King of the Mist kill. And that is a fight that's very unfriendly to this build because he does have you stop moving so much, which is really an annoying mechanic anyways. And then, to have it now doubled down on the fact that it's actually like a huge DPS loss because of this Volt is pretty annoying. So that was probably my least favorite boss of all of the in-game content, at least for this build. So Stormlance and Primal Strikes are pretty much things we only use in single target, really. Now, I will say, because of the way that Lightning Spear comes out, sometimes I'll just have like a squirrely like little enemy that's just like, dodging, ducking, dipping, diving, and dodging around me, and so I will just throw Stormlance down on their head. Stormlance, it just kind of throws some spears on the ground. They pulse damage. If you have a Frenzy Charge, they'll do a lot more damage, and that will chain out, so a Stormlance into a pack of enemies that's far away can be good. Usually a Lightning Spear is going to be better. In terms of the gems I'm using on that, still Lightning Infusion and Primal Armament, they go really well together. I'm using Blindside and Scattershot on that as well. Scattershot because you have a cap of 4 of these spears out at a time. I'll throw one over here, you can see. It's normally 3, and then if you quality it up, it'll go up to 4. You can see, like, though, if I throw them out, I'm getting all 3 here, and then I still have 1 lingering over there. So it is worth qualitying, but Scattershot just reduces the amount of spam casting Stormlance you have to do to maintain them. It's definitely worth the downsides that come with Scattershot, because the main purpose of Stormlance really is just to trigger shock on enemies consistently, and then set you up to use Primal Strikes. Primal Strikes is our kind of big hit in bossing. It is a melee skill, though, so you basically have to shock the enemy, and then you hit them with a triple hit of Primal Strikes, and it will do a big combo of damage and unleash like a wave of beasts that do a bunch of damage, and also remove the shock. And so this is where the comboing playstyle comes from. You're throwing down Stormlance, and then triple hit Primal Strikes, and then moving out of melee range and reapplying shock either with Stormlance or Lightning Spear. You're using Barrage to empower your Lightning Spear. I really only ever want to use Barrage on Lightning Spear, and thanks to the addition of Inhibitor last week, it's really easy to use Barrage. You can basically just hit Barrage on cooldown. You may not need to, but you definitely can. It adds a lot of damage and a lot of clear onto your Lightning Spear. It's sort of the equivalent of giving yourself like an extra 20 voltaic charges. Then in single target, I use Sniper's Mark purely as a way to generate frenzy charges. So normally we're generating frenzy charges because we're electrocuting everything and we have combat frenzy. That'll be enough to generate frenzy charges for us normally, no problem. But in single target, we're generally not electrocuting stuff that quickly, to take advantage of combat frenzy. So that's where Sniper's Mark comes in. So in melee or in bossing, it's kind of a combination of Stormlancing, keeping that down under the boss, and applying Sniper's Mark so that I can get like empowered Lightning Spears or Stormlances, using Barrage with Lightning Spear, and then really trying to get in there and mess them up with the Primal Strikes anytime that there is a opening in melee range. Now, in terms of infused weapon, I did kind of gloss over this. We're still using a lot of the same stuff as before. Conduction, just for more shock chance out of this. Exposure and Strip Away to really remove a ton of lightning resistance from enemies. Blind is really important. That interacts really nicely with the blind side. Stormlance, interaction there is really good. And then Culling Strike, just to get some coal out of that. Feels really good. So I'm not using Spear Throw, I'm not using Spear Stab, I'm not using any of these. I do have a bunch of jewels or skill gems just kind of locked in here just for, like I'd played around with them. And I think if I were going to add in some 6th gems, I think I even put this into the PoB here. Yeah, I did. So I have 2 options I would recommend for Stormlance for your 6th gem if you go for, 6 linking that. And that would be either Retreat is an option you can use. So it won't, the downside is that it does no melee damage, but that's fine, right? You don't do melee damage with Stormlance. The upside is you get 25% more damage if you've hit with a melee in the last 8 seconds. So the inverse of this is something we use on Primal Strike's Pursuit. You know, you're always hitting with projectile hits, so that's just 25% more damage on this. That's really great. The problem is we aren't 100% of the time going to be in that, having used a melee hit in the last 8 seconds window. So you can just use Heft instead. Heft will give you 30% more max Fizz hit, and we do have a lot of Fizz damage. Now this converts all of the damage into lightning, so if it were like increased Fizz or more Fizz, then that wouldn't convert, but because of the order of operations, the max Fizz hit will be increased by 30% and then converted to lightning. So Heft is actually about, I want to say like a 10-12% damage increase. Yeah, about a 10 or 12% damage increase on your Stormlance, which is pretty good. And it's good without any kind of downsides. There are a lot of bonuses that'll be like you do more damage, but you can't like apply any elemental ailments. And because we're trying to build up Electrocute with all of the damage we have, I really don't want. Yeah, I don't want to not be generating Electrocute on enemies with one of my main damaging skills. Then for Primal Strikes, this is kind of a finishing skill, so I think the Execute's just really good for it. You know, it adds, if we're in Execute range, obviously it's going to add 50% more damage. That's only the bottom third of their life bar, roughly, but it is very, very good, I think. So you could use Heft on Primal Strikes and Retreat on Stormlance. That could work. You could also use Execute on Primal Strikes and Heft on Stormlance. Either of those would work. Then in terms of auras, I'm using the Roa mount. I've really come to like the Roa mount, so lining them up with Meat Shield, Loyalty, and Minion Mastery. Pretty standard stuff. If you wanted to take this out to 4 sockets, I think Infernal Minions or Elemental Minion, whatever, the one that gives them resistances, I can't remember the name of it off the top of the dome, but that would help them survive a little bit. I would say the biggest thing to keep in mind when you're playing with the Roa, because it's very good for mapping, right? Very smooth. You're constantly moving. And this really, really helps with not getting hit in mapping. This incredible amount of, not really move speed, but like lack of slow is just very, very good. However, it's really important before you start up a breach or start up a ritual or you start up some mechanic or go into an area that you think is going to be like full of guys to just like dodge roll off of your mount and remount. I don't like the UI that they use for showing the stagger bar. I really wish it showed closer to the middle of the screen. Or, I don't know, just like it were better displayed somewhere. I would say that's the biggest issue I have with the build right now, is just simply forgetting to dismount from time to time, and then getting knocked off and killed. It's pretty much a 100% death rate whenever I get knocked off, and that is definitely the thing when I kind of like zone out in mapping and I'm just like watching a movie or whatever. That is the thing that has gotten me killed the most and been really like the most fun breaking for me. I got into editing and realized I hadn't mentioned Herald of Thunder. You know, it's Herald of Thunder, right? We use Innervate on it because it kills a lot of enemies. They're often shocked by other sources of lightning damage, so this is going to be up all the time. And then, you know, it's mostly killing enemies that are far from you, so Long Shot is really good because more damage. Reach is also really good because more AoE, and it's obviously very bad for close enemies, but you're basically only hitting far away enemies with Herald of Thunder anyway. Magnified effect, also more effect, or area. So this is like a 2-meter radius, which is huge. I mean, this is part of why we're getting such enormous clear. And I think a 5 link on this is all you'll ever need, but if you wanted to add in Lightning Mastery, if you really wanted to spend big and go 6 link on your Herald of Thunder, Lightning Mastery is not a bad option. It's like 5-6% more damage, pretty good. Alright, so in terms of the passive tree, I haven't made massive changes. I did play around with Bestial Skin for quite a while. I have upgraded to a full evasion body armor, and obviously, like, that's a pretty good amount of extra evasion chance, you know, 6% more evasion chance or so, like that's pretty good. However, when I went off to go bossing, I had given up Emboldened Avatar to do that, and I found that actually the reduction in electrocution buildup and shock chance was actually pretty brutal. I was really struggling on Zesht. I mean, like, for quite a while, I was just wasting like over an hour on Zesht. And then I realized, like, you know, the body armor, the evasion chance, it doesn't matter. Like I'm basically playing a glass cannon build and playing like a just don't get hit approach, and then like still taking defensive stuff. So I dropped that from Emboldened Avatar, immediately went in and killed Zesht. That was really like the difference maker, just the speed of getting that electrocute off on the boss really makes all the difference. You know, you get a lot of electrocution buildup out of this wheel right here. And then obviously, you know, you electrocute enemies, they get stunned, they also take 20% more damage, so that's like a huge setup window. You want to be tracking that buff on the left-hand side of their, you know, their nameplate will be up here, it'll be kind of on the left-hand side. As soon as you get them into that electrocute window, you want to jump into them with Primal Strikes, hit them with like Barrage and Sniper's Mark and a fully charged up Lightning Spear, and just really, really, really go to town on them. That is your burst damage window. I played around with dropping some of these bonuses like Giant Slayer and tried to get out of like this whole section of the tree, and I just didn't really like it very much. I really like being over in this section of the tree. I think if you were going to go for like more of an energy shield build, which would definitely be tankier, you could build up toward the top, but I'm really enjoying the glass cannon playstyle. I don't know how many deaths I have, and I don't really care. I think I've only bricked like 1 or 2 maps, or probably like a couple of maps, so not too bad. And then, you know, like I said, I had some struggles with Zesht, but for the most part, most of the rest of the bosses, no problem. I killed Olroth without any deaths every time. You know, pretty much all the rest of the bosses have been a pretty good time. So in terms of our Ascendancy, you know, we're still going with Critical Strike and Penetrate. These are like just adding so much damage. Coming from accuracy stacking on our weapon and dexterity stacking throughout our build. And then Predatory Instinct is just like a lot of extra damage on bosses. This is a really good thing to look for when you're trying to line up a Primal Strikes window. You want to look for that Predatory Instinct on the enemy's health bar, and then go hit them with that Primal Strikes. It'll do 50% more damage. And then Elemental Infusion, you know, it is just the thing that's kind of triggering a bunch of bonus effects for us. Obviously, this is 4 offensive nodes in this tree, so, you know, very, very, very offensive build. And, I mean, yeah, you have to just not get hit. I am a graduate of the University of Just Don't Get Hit, and you're gonna need to be, too, in order to make this build work. But it is a really satisfying playstyle to do exactly that. All right, now I want to talk about some of the gear here. So I'll start with weapon, because I think that's kind of the most... I mean, that's the key to the build, right? I've had... several people leave comments saying stuff along the lines of like, I feel like my gear's a lot better than yours, but my damage is worse. What's going on? And I think a lot of it boils down to really your rings and your weapon. Flat added damage is massive for this build, and you get a massive amount of flat added damage out of your accuracy. So just to like show off a weapon here, right? This is like a 400 DPS weapon, 20 accuracy, crit chance on it even. And if I pop this in, over the top of my weapon, you'll see that my damage goes down like precipitously. You know, like we just lost like 20, 30, I think there's like 30% less damage, right? 35 even. So now to compare my weapon is a 300 DPS weapon, but it has 600 flat accuracy. It also doesn't even have a crit chance roll on it. But that 600 flat accuracy is turning into, because of our Ascendancy, Penetrate, it's turning into like 150 flat added fizz to all of our attacks. So it is just completely compensating for that like 100 less DPS and the crit chance difference as well. Then I have another weapon here. This one is a 211 physical DPS weapon, but it has 600 flat accuracy. You know, it also has some crit chance, and if we just show that off here, you know, I'm at like 50k on my Lightning Spear. And now I go up to about 55k on the Lightning Spear, so it's like a 10% damage increase, you know, 16k on the Storm Lance from 14k, so it's like, whatever, 5 to 10% more damage by switching from this 300 DPS, 600 accuracy weapon without the crit chance to a 200 DPS, 600 accuracy weapon with the crit chance. Pretty big jump in damage, as you can see. Now, ultimately, the reason that I'm not using this Grim Edge is I really do want the Fizz damage leached as mana, and I would rather get that from a ring, but I just simply haven't been able to find one. And I kind of looked at like buying a ring that would have like a bunch of flat Fizz and life leech and mana leech, and not surprisingly, that was like a double or triple digit number of divines on that. So I ultimately just said like, I'll stick with what I have and just have like kind of mediocre to bad suffixes on my spear. I mean, clearly I'm making it work, so it's fine. But Mana Leech is another thing that you can get somewhere. This is kind of something that's also been asked about is, how do you fix mana? And there's really, I think, 2 or 3 main ways to do it. Basically, there's mana on kill, which you can get in kind of a variety of different spots. This spear has mana on kill. I think the easier spot to get it in is just simply to get a 2% of mana on kill sapphire. It does have to be a blue jewel. There aren't a ton of great modifiers to get on a blue jewel other than that. You can get crit damage bonus, that's what I've done here. You can go with 1% of max mana on kill, but it'll be noticeably, it'll be half as much, it'll be noticeably worse. So 2% is definitely a lot better. It will cost more, but it is worth that cost. Otherwise, you can get flat mana on kill. You can get it on your weapon suffix, which is kind of annoying. You can get it on like ring suffixes as well. In terms of the uniques, we're still using Katoko's Current and Lycosidai. You'll notice that I've transmogged my Lycosidai, and I wanted to talk about this. I used a weapon skin on the Lycosidai because I saw Window to Paradise, this beautiful shield, and when you block with it, it opens up and creates this beautiful, like it looks really nice, right? So I put a weapon skin on my Lycosidai, and it doesn't work. I have found several Lycosidai around. If I could just show those off, this is what it would look like normally. Not as good. Spider shield, yeah, not a huge fan. So, still okay with getting rid of that visual using this in its place. Get out of here, buddy. Yeah. So Lycosidai is huge for this build, doubles your accuracy rating, it's massive. Katoko's Current makes all of your lightning damage contribute to electrocution, and that's how we're able to generate frenzy charges easily while mapping. It also helps with, we build up stun chance by hitting primal strikes on bosses, and we also build up electrocute, and we're able to get both. So you're able to get a period where you shut down a boss with electrocute, and then also shut down a boss with stun chance. And those do kind of like offset from each other, so you're able to get a lot of control on bosses. That'll give you a lot of burst damage window, and obviously that's very good. So I like Katoko's Current a lot. Also, on the weapon, and just kind of throughout the build, attack speed is a little bit of a bait. It'll show up as improving your DPS a lot. It still makes hitting and running easier. If I had no attack speed versus a lot of attack speed, I can still cast and move faster. I can primal strikes faster. So it's not bad, but it is deceptive. Most of our damage is built around, we throw that Primal Strikes window out, it's a 3-hit combo, then you have to reset to Storm Lance or Lightning Spear to reshock the enemy and then do it again. So it's not like you're just sitting there like jackhammering one skill into an enemy over and over again. Additionally, you do have to move around to build up Voltaic Charge, and like that actually is at odds with attack speed. You actually kind of want your attack to be a little slower. So the downside of reduced attack speed from Katoko's Current, really not a downside at all. These were some self-found ones that I put a socket on and corrupted and got 2 sockets, and I was willing to go with 14% reduced attack speed. That's totally fine for me. Now, dexterity obviously is good because it adds more accuracy. Anything that adds accuracy is really good for this build. That is basically the whole premise of the build, right? We're an accuracy stacker. We're getting a lot of damage out of all of the accuracy. We're getting a lot of crit out of all of the accuracy. Accuracy really is that good. So just to hit on a couple more points of gear here, the Black Insignia was a big addition that I made since the last video. Getting Tailwind on crit, in maps, this basically means you're going to kind of just be at 10 Tailwind all the time. Tailwind is pretty great. It is 1% move speed and 3% skill speed, and then also increased evasion rating, 15% evasion rating. Stacks up to 10 times, very easy to maintain. As long as you don't get hit, this is going to give you like a massive increase in evasion and move speed. And then the skill speed is kind of whatever, but the move speed and evasion are huge. I'm going from 45 up to like 55, 60 evasion rating while mapping, and then also still 36% block from the Lycosidai. So I really am not getting hit very often, especially with being able to kite enemies so effectively, thanks to the row amount's speed bonus. And then I did weave in the Ingenuity belt that I found off of my first King of the Mist kill. It's just a very good belt. You can absolutely just get away with like a life and stats belt. I think I have a life and stats belt around here somewhere, maybe. Oh yeah, it's in my first tab, right? So like, this would make it easier to, I'd have to move some resist runes around, but obviously like this would make it easier to stay alive, gaining an extra couple hundred life. If my rings weren't triple added damage rolls, and like, you know, the resistances on the gear that I'm wearing are kind of precarious right now, right? But you know, I could very easily just switch over to running like just a regular belt, or even a headhunter would be ideal. And then just like, I think the ideal rings would be like life, fizz, and flat, like flat fizz and flat lightning damage as the 3 prefixes, and then just kind of whatever for the suffixes. But I think that's another important thing that I want to draw attention to, is that the flat damage, you know, you can see like I'm getting quite a lot of flat damage out of my 2 rings, and you can see the difference in damage that I gain out of buffing those rings by 30% is pretty substantial. You know, it's over 10% more damage out of swapping to the Ingenuity off of a regular belt. And you know, I would prefer if these were like fizz and lightning and life rings. That really would be better for reducing the amount of deaths. The added flat fire and added flat cold really aren't that great, but it's not bad. Getting fizz leech and mana leech from your rings would be preferable. That is the other way you would fix mana. Obviously, you know, mana on kill, mana from leech, right? So good to have a better on a ring, so you can devote more offensive modifiers to like your weapon suffixes, crit bonus, crit chance. That would be better, but it is what I have. It's what I found, so I'm definitely making it work. All right, I think the only other thing to cover is Amulet Anoint, and I'm anointing Serrated Edges. I really just think it's the best anoint you can get for the money. It's a Paranoia, Disgust, and a Greed. I have looked around at some other options to anoint, and I never really found anything that I thought was as good. Specifically for bossing, and the thing is that like this build does so much more damage than it possibly could need for map clearing, right? So you really do just want to emphasize doing more damage to like map bosses, in-game bosses, obviously, very tanky rares, I suppose, and then is stuff like Omniphobia or Ketosis, or whatever his name is, Kosis, showing up in Delirium maps, or Simulacrum. You know, those are things that you kind of want to optimize for more damage on, and this really is the best option for doing that. All right, so just to close on a little bit of kind of bossing tips here, you know, I think the thing that I played around with and found ultimately I liked for bossing was using attrition instead of the Roa. Obviously, you can't use Primal Strikes while you're mounted because it's no melee skills. So I tried just like dismounting and having the Roa fighting alongside me, using to like try and distract the boss. And I found that a little inconsistent because sometimes he would pull the boss's aggro and sometimes he wouldn't. And that I didn't love that so much. I also played around with a companion, a Quadrilla that has a haste aura on it. And I know this is very popular. I didn't actually like it all that much for bossing in particular. I felt like the Quadrilla just really didn't live that long, probably because of, you know, taking loyalty. I mean, that aspect of it is nice. Getting 10% damage reduction while he's up is good, but because he was dying pretty quickly, I didn't really feel like it helped all that much. And I thought attrition, obviously, I had to swap around. You know, I just swapped out some decks, small passives for strength in order to make that work. And you can always use a slightly lower level attrition too to make those strength requirements easier to hit. But getting more damage and then getting guaranteed Culling Strike after like 30 seconds of a boss fight was very good for me. I liked that a lot. And so that is ultimately the one swap I made for bossing, and I'm pretty happy with it. I am building towards stun threshold of no recent stun, deft recovery. I played around with this a little bit in mapping. I kind of liked it. I would say, obviously, for bossing, this isn't any good. You'd want to take like more damage nodes. I would think like come down here and make your way into this wheel. This will give you quite a bit more damage for bossing. But you know, for mapping, you really don't need any more damage. These small passives are also just like good if you have like a random odd point to pick up, and more attack damage and accuracy rating is always good. This build is fantastic. I've really been enjoying it all league long. It's definitely exceeded even my wildest expectations for a league start build. It's still mostly self-found. I just didn't think that a mostly self-found build on a new class would be able to do this much damage, clear this fast, blast bosses this hard without using any kind of gimmicks. But hey, that's exactly what it's doing. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more like it, and if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching. Bye.